Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek 2023. This was a summer-long event that was created a couple of years ago by Vin at Revenant Reads to celebrate Star Trek fiction in all its infinite diversity and infinite combination. And we varied things over the time. This time, Book Trek 2023 is a 3-month event. It's designed, I think, to capitalize on the fact that so many of us associate Star Trek with summer. I certainly do. So August is the end of Book Trek 2023. I've had a blast. On the Voxer group that we have, chatting with everybody, listening to their finds and their discoveries, but also in revisiting a lot of this stuff myself or reading stuff that's new. And for last night's Star Trek, I decided to revisit something. I read this when it came out, 30 years ago? I read this when it first came out. I had my hopes up for it, and it disappointed those hopes, but not completely. And this is a retread not only of what I have already read, and also what I've written about. I'm sure that somewhere in the past I have written about this thing, but also what Vin himself has done. Back in 2021, Vin did a video on this book, The Lost Years, by J.M. Dillard, which is, in that video, Vin says that this is largely effective, and I agree with that. I think a lot of my disappointments come from what it is not and never intended to be. This, as you can tell, is the story of the end of the 5-year mission of the USS Enterprise, under the command of James T. Kirk. This is meant to begin the process of bridging the gap between what we last saw when Star Trek went off the air and what we saw when Star Trek the Motion Picture came to the theaters. It was a radically different Star Trek. Lots and lots of stuff was different. Some parts were the same. Scotty and Sulu and Uhura and Chekhov were all on board the Enterprise. They're all still serving on board the Enterprise. That makes even more strange the fact that Kirk, Spock, and McCoy were not. Kirk had accepted a promotion to be an admiral in Starfleet. McCoy had angrily left Starfleet and said he would never return, and Spock had left everything, Starfleet and everything else, in order to go to Vulcan and endure the Kolinar ritual designed to purge him of all emotions. That's drastic. I remember when I was watching the motion picture in the movie theaters when it first came out, I was thinking, okay, well, I'm eager to get the crew back together, of course. I'm eager to see all these actors. I thought if Paramount did a Star Trek movie, they would recast everybody, but they didn't. They brought everybody back. I was eager to do that. I was eager to get to the special effects and the plot and whatnot. But even in the movie theater that first time, I remember thinking, well, there's a huge story here. And it seems traumatic. It isn't that Kirk and Spock and McCoy have gone on just organically. It looks like something happened, like something big happened. All 3 of their storylines show direct marks of trauma. Spock is trying to divest himself of his human half, of his mother. Kirk has left command of a starship. And McCoy, who's the only one that we get an explicit mention of, left Starfleet in outrage. Swore he would never return. We don't get any details about any of that, though. In the movie, we don't get any details. We have no idea what happened. And that automatically set Star Trek writers to thinking what did happen. What was that tragedy? It wasn't a calm thing at all. And that's what this book starts to try to do. It starts rather belatedly. As Vin points out in his video, this book takes a long time to remember that it should have a story to tell. And that's what bothered me about it. There is a story here. The story's ridiculous. It's one coincidence piled on top of another that culminates in something that is not in Star Trek. It makes no sense at all. Writers often do this. Lazy writers in Star Trek fiction will often go to Mr. Spock as a kind of Superman, as a kind of Pandora's box. If you have a problem, he can solve it, because he's weird. He's got superpowers. He doesn't, and Vulcans don't. Okay, they have abilities that humans don't have, but humans have abilities that they don't have. Vulcans, we are told in the original series, are telepaths. They are weak telepaths. Touch telepaths usually. Spock can get some people, weak-minded people, to do something from a distance, but he has to be up close. He doesn't have any kind of powers other than that. And those are taxing and extremely private. In this book, the Vulcans and the Vulcan Katras, their sort of immortal souls, have vast, Marvel superhero-style superpowers. And it's even more ridiculous now when I'm reading it than it was the few times I've read this in the past. It lets the whole book down. But the thing that this was mainly a disappointment last night. I read this again. I have liked it. There is solid writing here. There's some solid character work. The thing that disappointed me, I am saying it disappointed me here, although I would never say it disappointed me in a review. because it's a capital sin in a review to fault an author for writing a different book than you want. They get to write the book they want. You're supposed to analyze how they did the book they wrote. But I'm not doing a formal book review here for BookTube, and all I could think about when I was reading this is what a lost opportunity it is. As I've mentioned a few times before in Book Trek 2023, there is a great story to be told here. And it doesn't involve mad Vulcan telepaths. It doesn't involve anything like that. It doesn't have that second plot. I like to think that the reason J.M. Dillard takes so long to get the actual MacGuffin plot of this novel going is because she didn't want to do it at all. It was just dragging her feet. But the tension of that, of knowing that you got to write something for pocketbooks, mars the beginning of the book too. What I want here, ideally, is for somebody to write this novel, not 3 books like this, but one big 600-page novel that isn't a Star Trek novel. A novel that involving these characters that isn't a Star Trek novel. What I want is for John O'Hara to write this book about men who aren't quite young anymore and who maybe resent the end of their boyhood and what we don't know anything about the fame that this brought them. We have no idea what effect that has on their personal lives. There is no reason in this story to resurrect Yolanda an episode from the old Star Trek, For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky, the wandering world of Yonada. In that episode, McCoy has a brief love affair with the High Priestess of Yonada, and there's no reason to bring her back here. None at all. The only reason you do that is if you're writing a Star Trek novel. I want this story not as a Star Trek novel. I want Herman Wouk to write this. Or even Alex Haley. I want somebody to write this story about what happens when the 3 most famous men in the Federation bring their ship home. And give them actual adult, nuanced, 3-dimensional conflicts that are the reason why things are so different at the beginning of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. That doesn't happen here at all. J.M. Dillard tries a little here and there, and you have to wonder how much of it wasn't her fault. By this time, the suits at Paramount were looking over the shoulders of the people who were writing these books, especially something that directly ties in to movie continuity. You wouldn't have had much attention with yesterday's book, but this is supposed to bridge the gap between the end of the series and the beginning of the movie. And the minute you say the word movie, those suits, who all look the same and cannot be killed except with garlic and have reflective sunglasses that they wear even indoors, the minute you say the word movie, there are 15 of them in the room with NDAs. So you couldn't do that. And for all I know, you can't still do that. But I wish somebody would. Even so, reading this book just made me yearn in a very non-critical way. It made me yearn for a version of this book that no one can write. That would be great. That would be fantastic. We're not going to get it, but unfortunately, that was all I could think about when I was rereading this. So my Book Trek report for today is a bit of a downer. I'm going to try and fix that. I want to end Book Trek 2023 on a high note, but all I could think here is that I would read that book. I'd read the hell out of it. And so would every Star Trek fan. The fans of the original series are mostly older. And maybe they don't like, mad psionic Vulcans. Maybe they don't like that. Maybe they're thinking, okay, but Kirk's leaving command of a starship. That's interesting enough on its own. You could just tell that story. No. Anyway, that's my report for today. Star Trek: The Lost Years. I'm really pretty sure that I will not read this again. Why would I do that? I've read it a couple of times. I've written about it. Now I've made a video about it. I think I'm done with Star Trek: The Lost Years. It just doesn't do what I want it to do, which would be irrelevant if I were doing a formal review of it. But as a reaction video, no, it just doesn't do what I want. And it comes so close in some places that it's only agonizing to read. So I'm going to go on to something problem-free for the rest of Book Trek 2023. So I'll add something to the pile tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.